Everybody, this is Dream, and today we're going to break down the FanDuel slate here on for NFL Week 6 here. These are the main slate, so it's just the 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock games. So overall, we have a really solid slate here. I really love this slate. Before I get started, please smash that like and subscribe button. Really do appreciate it. Let's get into the quarterbacks. So the first guy here is Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen has been extremely good this season. He's just had great game after great game, and I look for him to continue this in this particular matchup. Kansas City has not been great against quarterbacks, and I look for him to have a gigantic game, especially if this game turns into a shootout. He's definitely my top play on the slate by far, especially at quarterback. The next guy I like here is Kyler Murray. Seattle has been another team that hasn't been good against the pass this season, and he's been pretty solid this season, even against tougher teams. And so this should be a game where he should really be able to blow out and have a really great game. He's averaging almost 250 yards a game, and he's got touchdown potential on the run as well. Then we're going to look at Tom Brady for Tampa Bay. He's really starting to come into his own. He's going against to Pittsburgh, who has just been terrible this season against quarterbacks, and I look for him to carve them up. Now, the only real risk with him is that he may not throw as many touchdowns as we'd like, but I still think he's in a great spot, and his price is a little bit cheaper than the other guys, so that helps. And then finally, Geno Smith for Seattle. Now, this is probably the Hail Mary option here, but he has 30-point potential in this game against Arizona, who hasn't been that great against the pass, and he's really starting to get comfortable with his wide receivers, and he's just been playing pretty well, and I think he's in a good spot. So that's my quarterback situation. In the running back situation, we have several good options here. Ramondre Stevenson first for New England. He's now their starting guy. And the Cleveland Browns have been really bad against the run. And as you can see last week in his first real good start against a bad team, he had 25 rushes, 161 yards. He even had a couple of receptions through the air, which he should get some opportunities for in this game as well. So I look for him to have a nice upside of a 20-point type of game. Obviously, his price has come up here on FanDuel. He's a little bit better on DraftKings, but I still like him here. Darrell Henderson for the Rams is now the starting back. Now, he hasn't been the starting back yet this season, but with Cam Akers out, he is the top guy now, and I do look for him to have a really good game against Carolina, considering Carolina is terrible against the run. And even when he was his backup, he was still scoring 5 to 10 fantasy points a game. So I look for that to go upside. Plus, he gets some passes through the yards. He's pretty good at that. So I think this is a great matchup for him. A.J. Dillon is another guy I like for Green Bay. Now, he has not been good so far this season, but he's got to break out sometime. He has the talent and the upside, and he gets the rushing attempts. He just hasn't been able to put it together. The first week, he was pretty good against Minnesota. So he's back to having a pretty decent team to go up against the Jets. Against the run, they're not very good. So I do like him here, but he is a little bit riskier, but he's kind of a Hail Mary option, and he's super inexpensive. Then we have Devin Singletary from Buffalo. Now, Kansas City is good against the run, but he is going to get some opportunity because he's going to get some targets through the air as well. And if he can get a decent amount of targets, his price point will pay off. He will get some decent runs as well, especially if they get ahead early in the game, which they may. Jonathan Taylor is a guy I really like here. Jonathan Taylor for Indiana. Now, he is questionable, so you're going to have to pay attention to that. And this is a tough defense for him to go up against, so we're going to have to see if he ends up playing or not. But if he does play, then he's somebody I do like, even though his price point is not super ideal here. Benjamin for Arizona. He's going to probably be the top back here for the Arizona Cardinals. With several injuries, he's now going to be top guy, and Seattle's very bad against the rush. And even this season, he's been the second or third guy in most of these games. He's actually managed to put some fantasy points together. He's also getting targeted through the air, which is a nice bonus. So I look for his price is too cheap for his potential production here. And so I do think he's a great spot. And Arizona should have a pretty good game, and he should be one guy that does pretty well. Then we're going to look at Joe Mixon. For Cincinnati, he's going to have a good game if they're going to keep staying this. But he has been good in these weaker teams that he's gone up against. And so I look for him to have 15 to 20 point upside in this matchup. The only real downside is that he doesn't get as many rushes as we might like him to get, but I still think he's a solid matchup, and if Cincinnati gets ahead early, he's a guy that could get more rushing attempts. Saquon Barkley here for the Giants in a great spot against Baltimore. Now, Baltimore is pretty decent against the run, but it doesn't really matter. He's been really solid against every team so far this season, with the exception of Carolina, who's actually not very good against the run. He's just been, he's getting attempts in through the air. He's getting a lot of rushing attempts. He's just a good option. He also has touchdown potential, so I do like him in this matchup, even though it's a little bit tougher than you normally like, but he is great. Leonard Fournette finally broke out, and now that Tom Brady's playing well, it's opening up the game for him. He's gotten 2 reception touchdowns in the last 2 games, and he's got one off the ground last game as well against that Atlanta team, and he's kind of against Pittsburgh, who's just, really terrible. This game will probably get out of hand early for Tampa Bay, where they will get the lead, and so he'll get more rushing attempts as well because of that, and so I do like his potential in this game. He's one of my favorite plays at this position. Then McCaffrey for Carolina. He's in a really good spot here. He's been pretty consistent this season. His floor is a little bit lower, but I still think he's in a great spot here against the Rams. As long as they can stay in the game, he'll get a lot of rushing attempts in this one. At wide receiver, we have Cooper Kupp, who is questionable. Obviously, he's the most expensive guy on the slate, but he's been extremely consistent this season. If he does play, he's a top option. Justin Jefferson is a good guy here from Minnesota. Miami's not been good against the pass. They're great against the run, but not against the pass. He should get a lot of opportunities, a lot of targets thrown his way, and if he catches most of them, he'll have a good scoring game. That's really been his issue in some games, is he's not getting the catches in some of them. But overall, it's just a matter of him, getting in there and getting those down. Diggs for Buffalo. He's obviously quarterback's top option. He's also getting plenty of targets. He's getting lots of catches, and he's getting lots of fantasy points as well. He's really only had one game where he was below what we really expected him to do in that game, and so I look for him to have a touchdown potential in this one, and potentially a really big game against Kansas City, who's not very good against the pass. Then we're going to look at Deebo Samuel. Now, here's the problem with Deebo. He's in a really good spot here, but you can see that he gets targeted a lot, but he doesn't always get a lot of catches. He's just not getting a lot of them. And so, man, if he could, in the games he does, like 6 for 7, he gets 20 fantasy points. But then he goes 2 for 7, he gets 11, 2 for 9, 10. So I think his floor is 10 fantasy points. His upside is pretty high, because not only is he going up against a team that's terrible against the pass, if he does, get these catches and he can score some touchdowns, his upside is high, but his floor is just low because he misses a lot of them. So he's kind of an enigma, but I do like him, but he's somebody you have to deal with that kind of ups and downs. Marquise Brown for Arizona, another guy I really like here. He actually does catch most of his balls, and he's been having a lot of really good games lately. He really only had one game where he didn't do very good against Las Vegas, but overall, he has touchdown potential in this one, and I really do like him here. Then Jamar Chase for Cincinnati in a great spot against New Orleans. He's been pretty consistent, around 10 fantasy points the last 4 weeks. Obviously, with his targets, we really got to get more than that, and especially with his price point, but he does have potential to have a big game in this matchup where they should be throwing the ball quite a bit. Then we're going to look at Lazard for Green Bay. He's becoming, outside of Randall Cobb, he's becoming the guy that Aaron Rodgers is getting the ball to the most and getting some touchdowns. And so if Green Bay is going to have a good game, then he has to have a good one. His floor is a little bit lower, and his ceiling isn't as high as some of the other guys, but I still think for a $6,200 player, he's a pretty good option. Waddle for Miami is in a pretty good spot here, because he's been good when Tua was playing, but he didn't do great the last 2 weeks with Bridgewater. But I think he's going to have a better opportunity with the third-string quarterback this week, and I think he's in a spot, if he does end up playing, which he should be a guy that's going to work. He's worked with Skylar Thompson most of the season, so I like him in this particular matchup because of that. Not only that, but Minnesota is not good against the pass. and so he has some upside in this one. Drake London, he's in a great spot here against Atlanta. Even though it's a tough matchup for him, against the 49ers, even though it's a tough matchup, he's been pretty consistent, at least in a few of the games. He had one bad game against Cleveland, and of course Tampa Bay is just super good defensively. But I think he's a guy that's kind of a safety valve here, and he's going to have a decent game if they're going to be able to keep the game going. Though he is questionable, so you do need to be aware of that. Dobbs for Green Bay. He's another guy that Aaron Rodgers is starting to rely on pretty good. He's had two subpar games, but he's getting the targets. He's just got to put together the yards and touchdowns now. And if he can do that, then he has some upside in this matchup. Adam Thielen is a guy I really like from Minnesota against Miami. Again, Miami is not very good against the pass. He's been very inconsistent this season, which is a frustrating thing for owners, but his price has finally come down a lot, and so he's a little bit safer to work out. Then we have Mike Evans for Tampa Bay against Pittsburgh. Tampa Bay is going to have a field day here, and he's got to be the guy that gets a lot of the catches for Tom Brady if they're going to blow out Pittsburgh. And he's in the last 2 weeks he's finally been better. And with Brady playing well, he has touchdown potential written all over him. And then Michael Pittman, Jr. For Indianapolis. He's been pretty good so far this season. He's had one game where he didn't do very well against Tennessee, but the matchups hasn't really affected him too much. It's more about just getting the catches in. So his price point's pretty cheap, and he has some potential in this matchup here against Jacksonville. In the tight end situation, we have Mark Andrews. He's the top option here for Baltimore against the Giants. Now, the Giants are good against the pass, but he's kind of the safety valve. And, of course, with Lamar Jackson, he does run the ball a lot. So Andrews sometimes gets lost in the weeds like he did against Buffalo. But I think it's going to be more like, a game against Cincinnati where it was kind of like 15-point game is what I expect from him in this one. Tyler Higbee is a guy that I think is in a really good spot here. He is questionable, though, so you do have to... Oops, not Higbee for the Rams. He is questionable, so you do have to be worried about that a little bit. But he's got pretty good upside. He's got 10 to 15 fantasy point upside in this matchup against Carolina, and I do like him here. Kelsey is another guy I like. He has some really good upside, except for the fact that Buffalo has been extremely good against tight ends this season. He's just been extremely good. So it's like, okay, so who's going to win, the defense or the offense? I typically go with defense, but if you need an alternative to Mark Andrews, then he's the guy. Zach Ertz here, he's been extremely good in 3 of the 5 weeks, getting 10 plus fantasy points a game in those 3, and then 2 games around 7. Seattle's not very good against the pass. He should have a really solid outing. And if you're just looking for a safer option, he's a good alternative to Higbee. And then finally, George Kittle, who hasn't really been as good as we'd expect him to be this season so far. But he's getting some targets, and that's, it's just a matter of time before he gets a touchdown. And I think he's in a plus matchup here against Atlanta where he'll have the opportunity to get that. So with that said, let's get into the defenses. I have 4 teams to take a look at here. We got the Rams against Carolina. Obviously, Carolina's not very good, and the Rams have had some decent games to start the season. They have sacks that they get quite a bit. If they can get an interception or 2 in this one, that would definitely boost their score. Then we're going to look at the Packers against the Jets. Jets are so odd because they're kind of like just hovering in the middle. But the Packers have the opportunity to get sacks and interceptions and stuff in this one. And I do like them in this one. I do like the Buccaneers a lot more. They have a great option here against Pittsburgh. And if you look at their stats, they have extreme upside here where they can get lots of sacks and interceptions. So I do think that they're in a great spot in this particular matchup. And then the 49ers, they probably be the best matchup here against Atlanta. Though I do like some players on Atlanta. They've been pretty solid and consistent throughout the season. So they're probably the safest option in the defensive situation. So with that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. I think it's a really solid slate. I think there'll be some pretty good scoring output on this particular slate. And so if there's any players you think I left out, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.